the defense minister, when he says that you cannot make ministers to account for the actions of security officers on the day of the elections.
Absolutely, I disagree with him, and completely so. You see, like he rightly said, there's a gentleman's agreement that when it comes to election, there is a National Election Security Task Force. But even with the National Election Security Task Force, we have the military, we have the police, and we have the other security agencies. And therefore, for him to come out with that kind of statement is uncalled for. First of all, we must also appreciate the fact that the mere fact that there is election security task force does not mean that national security ceases to operate. National security definitely operates alongside with National Election Security Task Force when it comes to criminal activities like murders and shootings and other things. Besides, if you remember carefully, we had soldiers deployed to almost all constituencies in this country. Is the minister telling us that he's not aware of those deployments? We were even told that they were not going to be deployed until the IGP called them to action. IGP never called them to action, but we found them on the streets patrolling. We found them at the polling stations. We found them everywhere at the collation centers. We found them giving warning shots and scaring people and fighting with members of the public. Is the minister not answerable to this? If he's not answerable to this, then what is he there for? So to just come out to make those sweeping statements that I think he's a bit bitter because he lost, and therefore he doesn't want to have anything answer. He doesn't want to answer to any questions. But the fact remains that the National Security Task Force, as well as national security, although they will not intervene directly, indirectly they work together. And I have been in that situation, and I know what I'm talking about. There is no way you will say that national security will abdicate their duties and everything, and then will not work at all during elections, and that it is national election security that has taken over the security of the state. And as you rightly read, the security of this state still remains in the hands of the government. From external and internal forces, they still remain in the hands of the government. And therefore, anything to that effect, the IGP will only have to brief. If it is in Parliament, then the IGP will only have to brief the Minister of Interior as to what they did. Unless there's a subcommittee that they are meeting, then it means that the IGP can go there and do his briefing over there. But otherwise, in open Parliament, they should be able to answer to some of these things and talk about the issues, the activities of the National Election Security Council, which, of course, includes his ministry, Ghana Armed Forces, which was actively part of it.
So you're saying that all that is required is for them to be briefed?
All that Parliament requires is to be briefed. And if the briefing will, because definitely police were at the ends of affairs, the military was part of it, and therefore they could do the briefing. But if we want to talk about the parliamentary subcommittees for interior and other things meeting, the IGP and other things, that's a different ballgame altogether. That's a different ballgame altogether. But in the open Parliament, definitely the ministries have to do that.
Is that why you said he has a political vigilante mentality?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've told you about the legacies that he's leaving behind. Have you ever seen a minister who has left this kind of legacy in Nigeria? Legacy in Ashaman, legacy in 2020 election, and legacy with the military moving for the first time to polling centers. As for collation center, we saw them in 2020, but they added to it this time around polling center, and they even went on patrols on the streets. And this time around, they were even deployed to almost every constituency, and they were at the beck and call of the NPP parliamentary candidates. They could call them at any point in time. And we saw them in Sawam, how they were following parliamentary candidates all over the country. And this is that's the way political vigilantes behave. You understand? They don't go according to those protocols. They could just be used anyhow. I don't know the kinds of people that were deployed, but all we knew was that they were soldiers. And these are the legacies of DOMINIC NITIWUL with a political vigilante mentality.
It seems you're saying two things. You're saying, one, you're responsible and should answer questions. Secondly, you're also saying that it is not true when he claims that they had no role on election day, that you could see their hands on election day.
And yes, I saw their hands during election day. And that is the reason why he cannot claim not to answer those questions. That's the reason why he cannot claim not to answer those questions. He must be answerable because the deployment of the military in this election in particular was something that was not agreed upon according to those standards that we saw. And therefore, he must be answerable. In fact, that's the reason why he's running away from it. That is the reason why he's saying that the election security was in the hands of the IGP, and therefore they should call the IGP. In other words, he wasn't ready to answer to some of those things, those activities that we saw with the military fighting and clashing with the civilians. And so he must be called to order by all means to Parliament to speak to those issues, to answer to those issues. That's the point I'm making. And those activities are akin to political vigilante activities. And I'm not surprised because that is the nature of the man who is in charge.
In which circumstances did you see the hands of politicians?
You see, when the National Election Security Task Force is handled by the IGP together with his team of security officers, it's supposed to be independent of the political actors. But at the point where you see the military being deployed to patrol streets, at the point where you see military who were told or who had also told us that they were not going to the police stations, at the point where you see them taking over collation centers, at the point where you see them patrolling streets, at the time when you see them being called by the parliamentary candidates of NPP at any point in time to come and cause mayhem and do all kinds of things, that is where you see political interference at work. These things did not happen years back. They happened this year, they happened in 2020. To some extent, they happened in 2012, by 2016, we never saw this kind of things anyway. So these are the circumstances that you see political interference at work. And so the Minister for Defense must be answerable. He must answer questions on how the military was deployed and the reasoning behind it, And then the fact that they themselves came out to say that they were not going to be deployed at particular places and other things until the IGP called them. We never saw any statement from the IGP requesting for their deployment. We never saw any situation that needed them there, and yet all of a sudden they were everywhere. We saw Obuasi. We saw how they were almost moving towards the polling station, and they were stopped by civilians. In fact, this election, I said elsewhere, if it were not for citizen vigilance, we would not have been smiling this time. We would not have been talking about, because the military was deployed much more than we have ever seen in our election history. It has never happened, the scale and the level of deployment of the military to almost every constituency to be under almost the command of the parliamentary candidates has been, it was unprecedented. And so if it were not for the citizens' vigilance, the people policing strategy that the people of Ghana adopted, that they were going to take their own security of the election into their own hands, things would have been different. And so for me, the Minister for Interior, the Minister for Defense, they should all answer and explain the depths of those two people, the violence, the deployment of the military to the polling stations and collation centers and the street patrols and etc. They need to answer so that we will begin to readdress some of these issues and say never again should we have the military in our elections. In fact, we have almost militarized our election security to the point that the military can now move anywhere, anyhow. They were even patrolling. We saw the military patrols. And that is where I saw the National Election Security Task Force. I don't know the kind of arrangement. They created gaps. Which were filled by the military patrols and other things. Because I expected to see police patrol teams here and there, but I never saw any of them. Maybe where I was, and maybe what I observed, I didn't. But if anybody saw police patrols around in numbers, then maybe I'm here to be educated.
So to the two ministers that need to answer question, the Interior Minister, the Defense Minister.
Yes, definitely have to answer questions on the roles that their various ministries played during these elections. What they could have done better, particularly the military, the Minister for Defense, to answer why the military was deployed in that scale, in that level, and in those numbers, which has been unprecedented. We cannot, and that's why I describe it as political vigilante. This time around, they realized they could not bring the what do you call it? They could not bring the national security SWAT, and they could not bring people to do so. This time they just deployed under the command of the PCs, and this was really dangerous, really, really dangerous.
Well, two things before I let you go. First one, dealing with the killings, the guns were fired, people were shot at. In fact, in Toulon, it was an open market where this was done. From the experience of 2020, 2024, a new government is coming into power. What do you think should be done about these things so that it does not become the normal for our elections?
I think we should come out. First of all, I think there should be investigation, a commission of inquiry or committee or whatever. I wouldn't stick to one or the other. Any of them should be constituted to investigate the 2020 incidents across the country where about 8 people died. That one must be done to give hope to Ghanaians and to give confidence to electors when they are going out, to realize that they are safe wherever they go. And similarly, those 2 people who passed on or who died during this election, and those who also suffered some injuries and other things, those things must also be investigated. And any other violence associated with this election must be investigated, whether by a committee or commission of inquiry or whatever. And then we must also come out with some kind of SOPs, generally, or a law or anything, I don't know, whatever form it's going to take, to let us know that the role that the military must play during our elections is a civil kind of responsibility, it's a civil activity, and we should not have the military in it. Because once the military comes to the forefront, I am not one of those people who will say that we will never have the military in our election security. I'm only saying that military will always deploy at certain strategic points and locations to strengthen the work of the police. But they must never be at the center of our election security. Because once they take the center stage, violence is inevitable. And especially at this time, when citizens have become so enlightened, they have become so empowered. And from now onwards, we are going to see citizens policing their own ballots from now till forever. We are not going to leave it in the hands of the police or National Election Security Task Force. Learning from what we've seen in this election, that is what is going to happen. NPP is going to do it. NDC is going to do it. And so people policing of the ballots and other things is going to happen. So the military must not come in until the situation has deteriorated to the point where police are able to handle it. Police are able to handle it. We have done it before, together with other security agencies. We have done it before, and we can do it again.
And then finally, what do you make of the handling of post-election issues? In fact, as of yesterday, it was even being reported that a school building where ballot papers were being stored had been burnt, among many other vandalization, destruction of election materials, among others. What do you make of security, the National Security Task Force handling of all this?
First of all, let me say that I commend the National Election Security Task Force for the good work done. Of course, there were some gaps, but at least they did well. We can talk about a relatively peaceful election. And so, to that extent, I commend them. But I really find it difficult to appreciate the kind of strategy that they are using post-election. The post-election strategy, in my opinion, has not been well thought out. First of all, we know that the most critical points in this whole election thing is after the election or during the counting and after the counting and other things and subsequent events. I would have expected a lot of intensified patrols of the police with, kind of robust policing patrols on the streets and in areas where there are disputes and disputed results and other things. But I'm not seeing that. Secondly, I'm wondering why the police did not place some police people on guard at the Kwashiman school day when they knew. Maybe they are not aware, but I will be surprised if they're not aware. So, together with Afro, they were able to bring ballots to the police training school. That one they were able to do and place guards there and other things. So, equally, the disputed ballots or those disputed results where the ballots have been placed at Kwashiman. From all indications, there was no police presence there. There was somebody, maybe a watchman, who was there. And I think it was a very negligent act on the part of the police not to have anticipated that such a thing could have happened and therefore must have made provision for it. You see, police operation is always about anticipating what the criminal could do and then coming out with certain scenarios and making provision or seeing how you could solve those, deal with those scenarios. I think the police failed in that regard. For me, I even wanted to write something about this today, but once you have asked me, I will not write it again. The fact remains that it was a police failure to take action to ensure that those disputed ballots which were kept there were guarded. And if they thought that those places were not safe, there could have been a gentleman agreement of relocating them to a safe place, maybe to the police station and other places where they could be safe. But we did not do that, and that is not the right thing to do.
ACP retired, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Welcome.
ACP retired Dr. Benjamin Agordzo speaking to us this morning. SM do some business. Nancy will join us, share a few thoughts, and then Dr. John Yanaba is on standby. SM.
Yeah, business, but where you know, okay, what do you make on Hassam? I was here launch here, you know, but my say we a year fee, and the main launch in your mammy, you know. And but what do you mammy your business in Vienna? Aquataps, your ultimate solution for clean and safe water. Baby, you know, so the Fibiano. Any say a so say buradio, drop a aquataps be fatun sodum. And Mr. Wamwa won't sodum. Aquatapsi ebe kuning emwani nyina e de fin sodum ama de friend no eye waterborne diseases no